Welcome back to Echo Ridge and episode 7 of our Ultimate Beginner's Guide. We are rounding the corner on cycle 37. We have a decent amount of food with over 77,000 calories stocked up, and to that point I needed to add another refrigerator because this one was getting a little bit too full due to all the muckroot. 81 kilos to be specific. And I had some comments asking why do I even bother putting the muckroot in the refrigerator considering it's not going to rot and spoil anyways. Well, besides having all the food in one centralized location for convenience, we're also trying to make sure that the hatches don't eat any of it. As you dig up buried muckroot, if there's a hatch around there, they'll have no problems gobbling it up. In fact, if we take a closer look at our friend the hatch, we can see that they'll gobble up most anything. Everything from your sand, sandstone, clay, crushed rock, dirt, sedimentary rock, and any of your edible foods. So in order to save and protect all of your materials, we try to sweep everything up and get it away from the hungry mouth of the hatch. On top of making sure all your food is protected from the hatch, another technique is going to be doing all that sweeping. And in order to accomplish this, I like to research smart storage and get access to the automatic dispenser. A basic method of being able to sweep everything up is putting down a storage bin, and once it's complete, we can select sweep only and pick those items that we want to make sure are protected from the hatch by being inside the storage bin. For instance, maybe we didn't have a lot of sand around the colony and wanted to protect it. Well, once we have sand selected, anytime we sweep by selecting the debris, hitting sweep. Alternatively, we can go down here to the sweep command or use the hotkey K and sweep everything up this way. Now notice at first, a lot of these don't have any available storage because our basic storage bin here is only storing sand. Well, we could go down through this list and start selecting other things like algae, maybe sandstone and sedimentary rock as well. I also see some dirt laying on the floor there, so I can go to cultivable soil and click dirt, maybe click clay as well. But as you can see, this storage bin is already getting pretty full. That's why I usually don't use storage bin for our mass storage. And instead, I use a pair of automatic dispensers. Now, there are many ways to set these up. This is just one that I think is pretty good. I make sure they are somewhat centrally located to our colony, so the duplicants don't have to go too far out of their way to get the resources after they've been swept up. And then I'll go to one of the automatic dispensers, select sweep only, and then I'll go to all. And then I'll uncheck the items that we don't want stored here, such as the polluted dirt, the rot piles, and eventually, once we discover ice, I will uncheck liquefiables too, because we don't want ice melting in this spot. From here, I'll click the copy settings button and paste the same settings over to this automatic dispenser. And now when we sweep things up, most everything's going to have a spot where it can go. To highlight another point, I'm also going to sweep up this area right here and this area right here. I'm also going to hit the wrangle button, make sure that there are no critters hidden in this row, because with all of our stuff being stored here, we don't want the hatches to have access to it. But the hatches aren't the only reason you want to pick up all this debris. The other reason being decor. Notice up here the more negative values of decor that are occurring. And it's because debris naturally has a negative to decor. Just in this one tile right here, it's a minus 65. Over here, there's even more debris and it's a minus 94. Well, how bad can the decor get? Well, it can get much worse than this. To highlight the impact of decor, I'm going to grab this Catalina right here. Every duplicant has a decor rating. You can see Catalina, their average decor this cycle is minus 38. Their average decor last cycle is minus 26. And if we go to the morale, we can look down at the bottom and it says their last cycle's decor was poor, so they're actually getting a 0 morale benefit. Whereas if we got that number into the positive, they would be getting a morale benefit, which then enables you to put them into more skills, because happier dupes, once again, can do more things. And the more things the duplicant can do, the better off your colony is going to be. Not to mention the fact that every duplicant has an overjoyed response when their morale stays high enough. In Catalina's case, they would become super productive. This Bubbles here becomes a sticker bomber, And this Pay here becomes a balloon artist, handing out friendly little balloons to everybody that makes everybody happier. And that's why it's a good idea, once you have a little bit of time, to start doing some sweeping. An important note on sweeping is that it is limited by how much a duplicate can carry. The skill Improved Carry 1 will give them plus 400 kilos worth of carrying capacity. So when they do come and pick things up, they'll be able to pick more things up at once, which will make your sweeping go a lot faster. With those two levels picked up, now when we go back to the decor overlay, we can see that there's not much negative decor here. So the duplicates will be better off when they're sitting here. Now because there's going to be so much debris here, the decor is going to be pretty bad, which is one of the reasons why we drop the debris lower than where the automatic dispensers are. That way, every time the duplicate comes to drop off something new, they're not getting decor bombed by something negative. Being that the duplicates are going to be here quite often though, we also like to put some positive decor around. In this case, I'm going to put a couple of bluff briars, and now when the duplicates are hanging out here or dropping things off, there's actually some positive decor. Now you might be inclined to put a bunch of positive decor around your debris, and this can also help, except for the fact that it's not really necessary. Because when a duplicate walks up here to grab some stuff, they're actually going to be standing right here, because they pick things up and drop them off from 2 tiles away. And the reason why that is because if you highlight over any sort of debris, you can see that it has a natural negative to decor, but the radius is only 1 tile. And by looking at the decor overlay, whenever you're highlighted over a tile, any sort of negative debris will highlight. In this tile, you can see it's the debris causing the decor, but if I move over to this tile, you can see it's the rock crusher providing some negative decor. Later in the colony, we'll be able to research more items that provide a lot better decor than the simple flower pot and bluff briar. Everything from hanging pots, carpeted tiles, to marble statues and portrait canvases, and even pixel packs and arrow pots. A quick note on sweeping, I normally like to hit the K key and then click the number 4, and that way they'll do some sweeping when I queue up these massive sweep jobs whenever the duplicates are idle. Just make sure when you are doing these mass sweeps that you don't accidentally sweep your infinite storage here, because it'll get to the point where that would take the duplicates a very long time. Also on the sort of maintenance tasks I like to do when our colonies have hit this sort of early game stability, by which I mean they have enough food and oxygen for the foreseeable future, is replace the bathrooms. These bathrooms are really not good for a couple of reasons. For one, the wash basins are constantly using water. Likewise, the outhouses are constantly using up our dirt. And considering dirt and water are a very valuable resource in the game, I like to upgrade our bathrooms pretty early on in my playthrough. In order to do that though, it's going to take a couple pieces of research. First, sanitation to even get access to the lavatory and the sink, and on the way it's going to give us access to basic plumbing, which has the liquid pipe and the pump, and then we're also going to need distillation. And I'll be able to show you why here in a minute. Just know that after I finish up sanitation, I'm going directly into distillation, and following that up with improved plumbing so I can get access to the liquid reservoir. While the duplicates are conducting that research, I want to highlight some of the other reasons why the outhouse and wash basins are bad. One of them is duplicate labor. Poor Lindsay here has to clean out this outhouse, which is wasting time where they could be spending sweeping things up. Additionally, like we spoke about in an episode or two ago, all this polluted water is somewhat of a nuisance and will continuously off-gas. Not to mention the polluted dirt that'll do the same thing. And I know we can take all that polluted dirt and compost it and get fresh dirt back, but remember, this is creating heat. Heat that we don't want in our colony, and it's also taking up more precious duplicate labor. With all the necessary research complete, we can get started on our bathrooms. First thing we're going to do is get rid of the compost. We're going to need this space. Speaking of space, we can see the difference between a latrine and a washroom is the addition of a flushed toilet, a plumbed wash station, and it can't have any outhouses. This will give us +2 to morale versus the latrine's bonus of only +1. We can also see that it has a maximum size of 64 tiles. And lucky for us, we had a little bit of foresight and we built this room to 64 tiles already. Now, because I know we're going to be wanting to run pipes throughout our bathroom, and you can't run pipes through a natural tile, we're actually going to replace all the natural tiles with standard tiles. We're also going to make sure that we use granite. Using granite tiles around your core colony is a good strategy to increase overall decor. As you can see, a standard tile gives you +5 to decor, and by using granite, you get a +20% decor bonus. So instead of 5, we actually get a 6. It's not a lot, but every little bit helps. With the floor pretty much finished, we're also going to do the exact same thing to the ceiling, because we may want to run pipes through there as well. With that complete, we're also going to make sure we keep our workspace clean by continuously sweeping all that debris out. Now under the plumbing section, you're going to be able to find the lavatory. The sinks are under medicine, but before we put them down, we need to take stock of where we're going to put them, because while we're building them, we can't remove these outhouses. Otherwise, the duplicants will have no place to go to the bathroom. So one strategy that a lot of people do is they'll start building their good bathrooms in another location. And that way, these bathrooms are untouched, but for our case, I want the bathrooms to stay here, and I also know the setup that I'm looking for, so it's not going to be too big of a deal. We're going to start by putting in 3 lavatories, which are going to cost us 400 copper ore each. And then I'm going to take out 1 outhouse and 1 wash basin to make room for the sinks. We'll start off with 2, but in the end, there will be 3. Once again, we're doing this in steps, just to make sure the duplicants still have a place to use the bathroom. With this complete, if we go over to our plumbing overlay, we can see that each of these buildings has a building intake and an output. And you can sort of imagine why. Clean water is going to go in, and dirty water is going to come out. So we'll start by putting some pipes in here. First, the drain pipes, and then the intakes. Of special note, you do not want to take your outputs and do something like this. The reason being is if you did this, there's a chance that this bathroom wouldn't be able to output its polluted water, because this one is using this line. It's for that reason we always make sure when we are connecting output pipes that we do them to where they'll join in this sort of 50-50 split. And what I mean by that is pipes in this configuration will take turns with their output. A blob from here will go over, and then a blob from here will go over, and they'll alternate. The inputs are a little bit different, but we still want to separate these in a similar fashion. But what's going to happen here is the water is going to come here, and half the water is going to go up, and half the water is going to continue on. And then of that remaining water, half of it's going to go here, and half of it's going to continue on. So of the 100% water that you had starting, only 25% of that water is actually going to be making it to this point. Now in this case, it doesn't really matter because these sinks are going to get full relatively quickly. I'll be able to show you this in a little bit more detail once we have water flowing and the system is sort of up and running. Now because I know that we're going to eventually have another sink here, I'm going to add its input and its output. And I also know that I'm going to be putting 2 more buildings right here, a little more on those a little bit later. But I'm going to put the pipes in for them right now. If we highlight over the sink, just like every other building, it tells you exactly what it's going to do. It's going to take in clean water and then output polluted water. Now it doesn't go into details in this specific tab, but if we click the database button, we can see that it requires 5 kilos of water per use, and it turns that into 5 kilos of polluted water. It also adds quite a bit of germs. The note that I wanted to make here though is this is a 1-to-1 ratio. 5 kilos go in, 5 kilos comes out. The lavatory is not the same. If we click on the database entry for the lavatory, we can see that 5 kilos go in, but 11.7 kilos come out. That's right, going to the bathroom is a water positive process, with every flush gaining 6.7 kilos, on top of the original 5 that you put in. To start off with, we're going to grab some fresh water, which brings up a greater point on water itself. Right now, we haven't found any of our infinite sources of water, but we do see a bunch of spots that still has a bunch of fresh water. These 2 up here, this one here, and our 2 pools that we've been using so far. Since this area is a decent size, we're going to make a good tank out of it. I'm going to make it the same height as 2 rows, and then bring it over here a little bit, and then probably bring it up something like this. Now eventually we'll have it going all the way up here, but we're gonna have to wait until I get the duplicants to push all this water over into our brand new tank. Now while we're building this tank, the duplicants are going to be coming in here and getting wet, and they're also going to be pretty cold. And you might wonder, well, this water is only 24 degrees, yet the oxygen's 24 degrees, so why would they be getting colder inside the water than they would be in the oxygen-rich environment? Well, if we click on the duplicant, we can see right now they have chilly surroundings. And it has to do with the environmental exchange. Water is a much better thermal conductor. Notice here it has a thermal conductivity of 0.60 and a specific heat capacity of 4.1 versus the oxygen that only has a thermal conductivity of 0.024 with a specific heat capacity of 1.005. We'll be getting into these a lot more later. The long and short of it is the water is taking away the duplicant's heat a lot quicker than the oxygen is able to. Hence the reason the duplicant gets the chilly surroundings. For those chilly surroundings, the duplicants are getting plus 10% stress per cycle. Additionally, they are also sopping wet, which the duplicants don't like, so they are also getting a plus 20% stress per cycle. So when you're doing a project like this, you just need to keep an eye on both their stress and their sickness. And when one of them eventually gets hypothermia, maybe give them a break from doing this sort of task for a little bit. But we can see here, the stress of the duplicants is getting higher and higher. And just like duplicants having an overjoyed response when they're happy for a long time, if this stress hits up to 100%, the duplicants also have a stress response. In the case of this bird, they're a binge eater, which means they're going to go eat up a lot of your colony's calories. Catalina is a vomiter. Of note about the stressed and the overjoyed responses, while the duplicants can differ in what their traits can be, for instance, not all Catalinas have allergies or glow sticks, all Catalinas have the vomiting stress response and become super productive when they're overjoyed, just like all bubbles are binge eaters and sticker bombers. Ah yes, as predicted, Catalina has contracted hypothermia. By clicking on the sick duplicant icon, it'll bring us to Catalina, where we can see what this hypothermia is doing. And for the next 0.2 cycles, they're going to be getting a -5 to science, machinery, construction, cuisine, and a +1 to sneeziness. The project's almost done, so Catalina's going to be fine, but it is still something that we want to keep an eye on. Right now I'm pushing the rest of the water over, and then we'll be able to build the rest of the wall for the tank. Just like this. With all the water pushed over, we can then deconstruct all these tiles, recapturing all their materials. Now for our tanks, I like to put mesh tiles on the top, and there'll be a couple of good reasons for this. First, it's going to hold all the debris that happens to fall, and that way it doesn't end up in our tank. Because as it stands, the duplicants are going to have to come back into this tank and pick all this stuff up, which again means somebody might contract hypothermia. And we try to avoid that wherever possible. I also like to put ladders in the middle of the tank, and that way we'll still be able to reach all parts of it for the eventuality that we want to add a liquid vent or maybe some future automation. We're also going to deconstruct this pitcher pump right here and be rather quick about it because now the duplicants aren't going to be able to get over. Then we're going to put another pitcher pump right there. Now right now this pitcher pump doesn't have any access to water, and that's because the little hose here only goes down so far. So in larger tanks like this, I like to put one pitcher pump up top for whenever the tank is pretty full and this pitcher pump can reach, and then one right here in the middle. And that way if the tank has been drained a little bit, the duplicants still have access to water here. And note the water levels, because this pitcher pump is first, if the tank is full enough and there's water up to here, the duplicants will use this pitcher pump. But as soon as this one can't reach any water, they'll then go down and use this pitcher pump, and by then the water level will be low enough to where the duplicants shouldn't be getting the sopping wet debuff by using this pitcher pump. Alternatively, you could also just disable this pitcher pump until the time that it's needed. I don't think it's a big deal, especially when our colony is generally stress-free, so having a duplicant get sopping wet every once in a while isn't a game breaker. Another benefit of the mesh tiles is we're actually able to put down a couple of bottle emptiers. Because mesh tiles allow liquids to go through, we can put the 2 bottle emptiers here, and the water will pass right through and land in our tank. And then at the edge of our tank, I like to put an automatic dispenser in case we ever get any ice or snow. The duplicants will be able to drop it right here. It'll go down to our tank, eventually melt, and create more water. Alternatively, we can also use it to store all that polluted dirt. We have it on sweep only, and so we can take, for instance, this little pile right here, sweep it up, and it'll be brought right over to the automatic dispenser, where it'll drop down here and not have a chance to off-gas because it's submerged. With our wonderful new tank complete and pretty clean, we now have a great location to put a liquid pump. Now, a liquid pump takes 400 kilos of a metal ore and requires 240 watts worth of power. Notice it just has the output pipe, which makes sense because it's taking in water from around it and pumping it away. We'll put it right there, and then we'll grab one liquid pipe and bring it all the way up for our future use. We're also going to need to connect it to our power grid, like so. And once that's complete, we'll have a source of fresh water to be able to bring into our bathrooms. And I just realized I used insulated liquid pipes on all of these. That was a mistake. I only wanted to use regular pipes. I suppose it's a good enough time to explain the difference between insulated pipes and liquid pipes. But remember we were talking about that thermal conductivity and specific heat capacity before? Well, here I have an insulated liquid pipe made out of sandstone. It has a thermal conductivity of 0.091 and a specific heat capacity of 0.8. Right next to it, I have a standard liquid pipe, also made out of sandstone. Notice it has a higher thermal conductivity at 2.9. Not to mention that the insulated liquid pipe has the insulated tag. And while outside the scope of this Ultimate Beginner's Guide, know that anything with the insulated tag transfers its thermals a little bit differently than things without the insulated tag. But the long and short of it is, liquids going through an insulated liquid pipe aren't going to exchange their thermals with the outside atmosphere nearly as quickly as a standard liquid pipe. Or another way to say that is the insulated liquid pipe has a lower thermal conductivity than the standard liquid pipe. Likewise, the regular liquid pipe has a lower thermal conductivity than the radiant liquid pipe, which allows for a lot of temperature exchange. But this isn't too big of a deal. All we have to do to replace all those insulated liquid pipes is build right over the top of them with standard pipes. Our pump is installed and ready to go. But before we connect it to the bathrooms, I wanted to talk about a couple of different methods on running your plumbed toilets and sinks. You could very easily just connect this liquid pump into the toilets and sinks and then take all the polluted water, outputting it, and send it somewhere else. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not as efficient as what we could do because it would slowly use up all of this water. What if there was a way to take all that polluted water and turn it right back into clean water? Well, there is. And that's by using the wonderful water sieve. Now, the water sieve is a building that you need to become very comfortable with because it is an absolute necessity for a lot of colonies, especially in the early and mid games. Note that it takes 5 kilos worth of polluted water and outputs 5 kilos worth of regular water. It also ends up producing 200 grams worth of polluted dirt and 4,000 DTUs worth of heat. Notice though that it requires a filtration medium. A filtration medium, if we click on the database, is sand or regolith. And we've already had a little bit of experience with filtration medium when we started using the deodorizers. So we're going to take one of our wonderful water sieves and we're going to put it, say, right here. I'm saving all this room over here because I have a few extra tools that I want to be able to put in. Also, because of the location of where our dirty water is coming out of, I wanted you to note that some buildings are able to rotate by hitting the O key. And now the input is over on this side. So when we grab this pipe here and bring it all the way down to our water sieve, it's sort of a cleaner installation. Likewise, we're going to come out of here and go directly into our bathroom system like that. Now, this isn't going to work for very long, but I at least want to get the system up and going and show you what other kind of improvements we're going to need to do. We're also going to need power for our water sieve, so we're going to put it through the tiles and then up into the water sieve. When you start having regular tiles around here, it makes sense to put the wire in the tiles. And the reason being is because regular wire has a -5 to Decor but its radius is only 1 tile. So in an area that already has that wire complete, for instance, this tile here just has a positive 41 decor. But because this wire is inside the tile, none of its negative decor is able to come out. All right, we have our water sieve in. It's connected to our output line, and we have our freshwater line. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these up just like this. Now in the past, before you had access to the disconnect tool, a lot of people like to just bridge it on using a liquid bridge, something like this. Now there are definitely some advanced uses for the liquid bridge in systems like this, but right now, the regular tile will do just fine. Notice that as soon as we connected it out, the water started flowing. If I were to disconnect these pipes, notice the water sort of stops flowing. And that's because it doesn't have access to an input. All your pipes, whether it be a gas pipe or your plumbing pipes, need an output and an input, and that way the water knows which way to flow. In this case, when we connect it back up, the water starts flowing because it sees where it needs to go. Take note that I had to disconnect this pipe right here in order to get the water to flow. This output was messing with the plumbing dynamics, so until we get all this water in here, we'll leave it disconnected. But with it now full, we can disconnect the water from the source, and the system is sort of working. Notice when a duplicant uses the toilet or the sink, polluted water is coming out and is going to head right into the water sieve. Then if we connect this pipe back up, the fresh water will be able to come back out, and we have a wonderful closed loop system that will not be using any extra water. With the plumbing lines in, we can now deconstruct this outhouse and this wash basin and put in our third sink. And now for these other 2 gaps. Some people like to put 4 lavatories and 4 sinks in this spot. And that way you can pack more duplicants in on each shift without having to worry about too many duplicants needing to use the bathrooms at once. But what I like to do is go back to the plumbing menu and put in a couple of showers. Conveniently, they have the same output and input system, taking in fresh water and outputting polluted water. And if we go over to the database, we can see the benefit of the shower. During a duplicant's free time, there's a chance they'll come and use a shower. And if they have any debuffs, such as sopping wet, soggy feet, minor or major eye irritation, they'll be cured of it after their shower. Additionally, they'll be given a +3 to morale for taking a shower. So for me, in this early and mid-game setup, having a shower inside your bathrooms just makes sense. Not only for its ability to be able to get rid of those debuffs, but also it's just another source of morale. Remember when we talked about the lavatory, where we said the duplicants are going to be creating more water than they're using? 6.7 kilos to be exact. If we were to leave this system as is, it would eventually fail. Because more water is coming out than going in, all the water would end up getting backlogged here at the input of the water sieve. It's for this reason you need to have a plan on what you want to do with all that extra water. And there's sort of 2 options. One, you can use all the excess water in its polluted water form, and to do that, you just bypass the input here. And what happens is anytime the water sieve can't take any more polluted water, the excess will bypass this input and we could send it somewhere else, such as into a liquid reservoir. But eventually that liquid reservoir would get full too. Or you can allow the water sieve to clean it all and then just bypass the excess here. And then we could send all that excess water to, say, a bristle blossom. Because remember, the bristle blossom requires clean water. And it doesn't really care about all the nasty germs coming out of the toilet. Because as a point, the water sieve doesn't get rid of germs. It only turns polluted water into regular water. And we would do that just by putting down a hydroponic farm, which has an input. And then we could bridge on the water, separating it here and making it go up this way. And using this bridge here forces all the water to go up unless it's full, and then it too would be able to bypass an input. So one common setup could be something like this. But that's not what we're going to do. And the reason being is because there is a plant that's going to help make our mid-game so much easier, and that is the Thimble Reed. When you feed the Thimble Reed polluted water, 160 kilos per cycle to be exact, and you wait a couple of cycles, you're given 1 reed fiber in return. And while we're not quite there yet, reed fiber is a required ingredient in creating Atmos suits. So if we can get our hands on this Thimble Reed, we could take all that excess polluted water and feed it to it and start getting our early reed fiber production cranked up. Unfortunately, reed fiber is found in these nasty biomes here called slime biomes. And as you can see, there is a bunch of polluted oxygen, and we don't want that polluted oxygen spreading all over our base. So to prevent this, we're going to put down a couple of wonderful deodorizers, make sure we connect them with power as well, and that way when we dig down here to go get our wonderful reed fiber, we are not going to have to worry about any of that polluted oxygen escaping. In fact, this is actually pretty convenient because all this carbon dioxide that's been backing up is going to be able to sink even lower. Now, this is going to take the duplicants a little while to get through because there is not a lot of oxygen in this area, so the duplicants have to continuously stop, go up and get a breath before they can continue down digging. But we'll also get started while they're doing that and put in a couple of hydroponic farms. Earlier, we had talked about regular farm tiles when we were talking about planter boxes, with the difference being that the planter boxes you build onto tiles, whereas the farm tile is a tile themselves. The difference between the farm tiles and the hydroponic farm tiles, though, is the farm tiles don't have an input for piping, and they only require dirt or clay, whereas the hydroponic farm tiles require a metal ore. And already, what we said might happen is about to start happening. Notice we're starting to get backed up here in water. We have more polluted water coming, just like this. And so eventually the water sieve isn't going to have any room to be able to output the clean water, so the polluted water will just back up into this line. And it would take several cycles, but eventually, if it backed up far enough, the lavatories wouldn't be able to output any polluted water. And when that happens, people can't use the bathroom, and then they start making a mess everywhere, and nobody wants to see that. So let's get a hurry on our wonderful Thimble Reed before this problem gets any worse. Another issue that might pop up when you're digging in these biomes is the fact that there's slime in here. Whenever you dig slime out of its tile, all the slime lung germs start to spread. If we check the germ overlay, we can see the presence of all the slime lung. And while right now, it's not really making a difference because all the dug up slime is sitting in polluted water, you might eventually get to the point where all that slime lung is inside your polluted oxygen. And when duplicants breathe the slime lung germ, there's a chance that they will catch slime lung, which is a little bit nastier of a sickness than the hypothermia we saw before. Which is another great reason why we use these deodorizers, because oxygen kills slime lung, as does carbon dioxide. So the positioning of this biome worked out absolutely wonderfully, because we've made it down to our wonderful Thimble Reed seed, and we even got a spare right here to put in. So we can now go back to our hydroponic tiles, select Thimble Reed, and click Plant. And now all we have to do to get rid of this excess is tie it right into our Thimble Reeds. So when the polluted water starts to back up, it'll overflow past the water sieve and be fed directly to the Thimble Reed, where we'll eventually get some all-powerful reed fiber in return. With those pipes connected, we can see the polluted water flowing past and being fed to the plants. Pretty neat system, huh? Now, one thing you will have to keep an eye on is the heat around here. Thimble Reeds only like to grow in temperatures up to 37 degrees. So if they ever get stifled, in other words, they're too hot or too cold, they'll stop accepting all this polluted water. So temperature management in this area is clutch. Now, as we can see, the water sieve, as we knew would happen, is creating polluted dirt. It automatically spits out the polluted dirt after a little bit of time, and we want to be able to do something with that. Now, we could put in another compost, but remember, that does create a little bit of heat, and especially over here, we don't want any more heat. Now, we can do one of two things. We could just continuously sweep this up whenever we see it, or we can turn off sweep only on this automatic dispenser. And if we do that, duplicants are going to always go look for polluted dirt and drop it off, just like they're doing now. And unfortunately, this will create an infinite loop. The duplicants will grab the polluted dirt, drop it off, and then they'll get it again. We can prevent this by using doors. Every door has access permissions. They start in default with the ability for duplicants to be able to go through them both ways. But if we take away those abilities by turning off the default permissions, the duplicant can no longer go through it, which means they can't reach this polluted dirt. And if they can't reach the polluted dirt, it's not a problem that this automatic dispenser isn't on sweep only. And now, whenever we find any polluted dirt, the duplicants are going to grab it and drop it off automatically. The last thing we want to do is take care of all these nasty polluted water bottles that have been piling up around the base. And since we now have an ability to use polluted water, why don't we feed it to the Thimble Reeds? So we're going to set up a little system here involving one liquid pump and a bottle emptier. And the system's pretty simple. We can select the bottle emptier and tell it to accept any polluted water sitting in bottles. The duplicants will drop those bottles off. The liquid pump will take all that polluted water and feed it directly into the Thimble Reeds. Now, because we are dropping off polluted water, there is a chance it will off-gas. And because of this, we have a deodorizer sitting right here, so if it does create any polluted oxygen, the deodorizer will clean it. As a note, if you have too much polluted water in the colony, it will back up this line, because remember, each Thimble Reed can only drink 160 kilos per cycle. And just from our old bathrooms, we have 140 kilos sitting here and 600 kilos sitting here. So make sure, especially at the beginning, when you start dumping off all those backed up old polluted water bottles, that you keep an eye on your closed-loop bathroom system. The last little tip that you may want to do is, because the duplicants are going to be dropping off dirty polluted water bottles, just like you saw, Lindsay now has a bunch of food poisoning germs. So one method to combat this might be to put another sink on this level. You already have the infrastructure in place, and we can tie into it pretty simply. We grab some of the water from the input line, and then we take the output and feed it right back into the water sieve. Except we're going to do it a little bit cleaner and bring it down and then up and over. You don't want to have it feeding directly into the Thimble Reeds, because the priority for the water always needs to be the bathrooms. But this system here will make sure all these duplicants aren't running around spreading all those germs. Because if they go from here and then go to eat, they're going to ingest all those germs, which of course is going to once again make them sick. It's for this reason why I normally like to have the water system set up after these bathrooms on the same row. And that way, once they get done doing all this, they have to go past the sinks anyways. It just so happened in this installation, I didn't have enough room to put the water sieve and everything else over here. In this episode, we talked about debris and the negative decor that it causes, and we put in a system to sort of help that. We also learned some tips and tricks about sweeping. We learned a little bit about sickness and stress responses. We built a wonderful water tank and created our closed-loop bathroom system. We also expanded upon that by creating a system to deal with all of its overflow, in this case, using Thimble Reeds to help our future selves out by creating some early reed fiber. Next episode, I think it might be time to get into some ranching. I hope you're looking forward to that and are still enjoying this series. So until next time, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.